This is for Patrick Peterson. Buddy, you're at the end of your career, okay? The reason we gave up on you is because you didn't deserve the money that the Minnesota Vikings gave you. You know, they're used to old corners falling apart like Xavier Rhodes, and now they have you who really isn't that good at the position you play. So let's not talk about guys that are getting paid 40, 45 million. If I'm remembering correctly, I think that the Minnesota Vikings, you know, they were on top of the world until your Dallas Cowboys absolutely up a couple weeks ago. And you know who plays for the defense that gave up 40 points? That's Patrick Peterson, baby, okay? Patrick Peterson, simply you and leave us alone. Welcome, everybody, to the return of the Cover 2 podcast. I am Nenad.
I am Jared Smith.
And boy, guys, do we have so much to talk to you about. We took our little holiday break. We tried to get a podcast done multiple times, but it's just tough with all the holiday festivities, all the amazing games going on, the World Cup being added to the middle of the day. It was tough, but we're back, and we're going to be back with you for the rest of the football season, the rest of 2022. And we're going to be providing you great content every single week. Jared, how was your holidays? Did everything go well? Did you enjoy Thanksgiving? Did you eat enough? Did you get to watch your Cowboys on Thanksgiving? Well, tell me a little bit about your holidays this past couple weeks.
I mean, come on, man. Like, you know that I always watch my Cowboys on Thanksgiving. And for the last 3 years, it's been a horrible Thanksgiving. It sucked. It is my favorite holiday. Like, Thanksgiving is my favorite. Like, Christmas is cool. I get it. My girlfriend loves Christmas. That's her thing. You know, Easter, New Year's, like, Thanksgiving is my favorite holiday. You get to be with family or friends or whatever, you know, food, and you get to watch football all day and sit and eat as much and drink as much as you want, and no one can judge you because it's a day to eat and hang and chill. So, you know, this year, playing the Giants, Dallas wins. I was like ecstatic, uber happy. So yeah, no, it was a good Thanksgiving, man. Went up to Orange County, not too far. And yeah, man, ate, drank, watched the Cowboys win, ate and drank some more. And yeah, it was freaking good time.
Yeah, no, so Jared, my holidays were a little bit different. I didn't have necessarily the traditional Thanksgiving day, but that was because I went to Boston the weekend before to celebrate the Ivy League champions to go to the game. They want to say Ohio State and Michigan is the game, USC, UCLA, whatever other rivalry you want to come up with. But the true game in football is Harvard versus Yale. Ooh, and Yale came out with the victory.
Those are some fighting words.
Hey, you know what? I'm just saying, like, it's, you know, these old ass stadiums you get to go to, the alumni at these places. I mean, you can't beat the alumni at Harvard and Yale, right? You're not even looking at sports, looking all over the world. Some of the top people in the universe went to these schools. So I went and I watched the Yale Bulldogs, these Bulldogs right here, win the Ivy League championship. And not only win the Ivy League championship, they didn't even co-win it. They won it outright. My brother, Chase Nenad, was able to play the last couple of games of the season. I was able to see him perform in person, crazy enough, Jared, for the first time ever in college. He's been there for 2 years. It's the first time I actually got to see him play. The other times that went out, he was injured, unfortunately. So that was really cool. We got to storm the field on the opposing team's ground, which is pretty cool. The Yale Bulldogs took over Harvard Stadium. And it was really, really cool. So we kind of celebrated our Thanksgiving over there. We had some uncles and some relatives come in to enjoy the game. We went to dinners, all that stuff. So we kind of had that family Thanksgiving atmosphere, you know, a couple weeks ago. So it was a little different for me. I always enjoy watching football. I had my Serbian World Cup team also playing on Thanksgiving, which was pretty cool for me. So I was watching two types of football at the same time on Thanksgiving. So it was definitely cool for me. But now, before we get into the podcast, you know, Jared, I told you I had off the podcast, I had something, you know, kind of a secret to say. And you actually mentioned it a little bit earlier. You know, I like to start these podcasts, you know, on a positive note. And that's why I gave you your Cowboys win. And I gave myself the Harvard-Yale game. And I've had some success watching football games the last couple of weeks. I went to Cardinals Rams, and the Cardinals were able to win that. I went to Harvard Yale. My brother won the Ivy League championship. I went to USC Notre Dame, which was pretty damn cool. Talk about the game. Another big rivalry game. USC won. I got to watch Caleb Williams go insane.
Mm-hmm.
And all that's cool. But I opened my social media yesterday, and Jared, if you talked about the Arizona Cardinals for a long time, the best player on that team was a corner with the number 21. His name is Patrick Peterson. And Patrick Peterson might be the most bitter NFL player right now in the league, because for some reason he plays for the Minnesota Vikings, but the Arizona Cardinals are absolutely in his head. This guy talks shit on us every single week. And what was nice to see, since he called out Kyler Murray, saying Kyler Murray only cares about himself, and Kyler Murray just shot back at him and said, it's not fucking true, okay? And just because you want views for your shitty podcast or whatever you do, you don't have to make up stories. So this is for Patrick Peterson. Buddy, you're at the end of your career, okay? The reason we gave up on you is because you didn't deserve the money that the Minnesota Vikings gave you. They're used to old corners falling apart, like Xavier Rhodes, and now they have you, who really isn't that good at the position you play. So let's not talk about guys that are getting paid $40, $45 million. And, when you beat the Cardinals, you had nothing to do with it, brother, okay? I'm just saying. So, enough with play for your own team. Your team has its own effects. Jared, if I'm remembering correctly, I think that the Minnesota Vikings, they were on top of the world until your Dallas Cowboys absolutely fucked them up a couple weeks ago. And you know who plays for the defense that gave up 40 points? That's Patrick Peterson, baby, okay? So I'm just saying, man, enough. I've had my issues with former LSU DBs that used to play for the Cardinals in the past. Now I have an issue with the second one. So maybe it's just these LSU DBs who think they're a little bit better than they are because they played for DBU. Last time I checked, LSU hasn't done much in a couple of years now. And the only reason they were good a couple of years ago is because of their offense, not their defense. So Patrick Peterson, simply fuck you and leave us alone. Okay, buddy? So let's move to that.
I got breaking news, and this could lead us into our college football segment because I think we got to wrap up the NFL. Michigan running back Blake Corum out for the year.
Oh no!
Listen. They obviously absolutely just dismantled Ohio State without
hold
him.
on. No. Okay. We got to talk about that. Because I don't think that's true. And so we'll talk about it. Let me grab my phone. Let me grab my phone really quickly because if we have breaking news happening, I need to see.
Yeah, it's breaking. I got the TV on right here. Well, you don't believe me? You're
No, I do.
At your computer.
I got to see it for myself.
I'm just saying. It didn't come up on my phone. It came up on the TV. I got ESPN to my right. Your guys' left.
No, I believe.
Yeah.
I wanted to see if I got my Taylor Swift tickets, but I didn't. So
shit.
Damn. No. So let's go into college football. We're gonna go into college football. That's big. That is really, really big because Michigan's offense, essentially the whole year, has been led by Blake Corum. And so Michigan, they're ranked number 2, Georgia number 1, TCU number 3. Oh my God, the USC Trojans number 4, Ohio State number 5, and Alabama number 6. Those are really the only teams that could make it at this point, barring some just really weird, odd catastrophe. But realistically, because Ohio State and Alabama don't play, they can't really, what's funny is they you'd be like, let's just schedule each other, right? Like you go into these weeks and Ohio State and Alabama go, fuck it, let's play one more game, right? Is there rules against that? I don't know. But yeah, so Jared, real quickly before we get into the semantics, I'm glad you brought that up, that we're going to be talking about a Blake Corum-less Michigan for the rest of the year. Your thoughts on the rankings when they came out on Tuesday?
The top four are 100% right, in my opinion. Georgia, deservingly undefeated. I said it all year long. Nick has been on and off the boat. I've been trying to pull him back in and tell him that Georgia's been the number one team all along. And he's had 1 foot out, sometimes almost 2, but I was able to drag him back in, I think. Georgia deservingly deserves to be number 1. Michigan, obviously, after that dominant performance at Ohio State, after literally for 10 plus years getting dominated by Ohio State, now they've won 2 straight against them. They very much deserve to be at the number 2 spot. Jim Harbaugh deserves a lot of credit, and maybe not all of it, because a lot of the slack and the crap that we were giving him and I was giving him specifically was well deserved back then. But he deserves his flowers right now for getting his team to where they are. They deserve to be number 2. TCU also deserves to be in here at number 3, even though they've had some close games recently and haven't necessarily looked dominant. They're still undefeated, right? So they deserve to be number 3. And the USC Trojans, baby. And dude, when was the last time we had a Pac-12 team that has been in the running this late into the college football season?
Man,
Oregon. I don't know.
No, well, Washington, I believe, was in the first college football playoff ever. But that was, I mean, it was Jake Browning.
It's been a minute.
And they got some macked by Alabama in that game. But yeah, really, I don't think we've had as legitimate of a team as USC is for the Pac-12 ever for the college football playoffs. So, yeah. And you know what's funny, Jared, too, is like the Pac-12 this year, like, really was like the most competitive. Like when you looked at it, you're like, Utah's the best 2-loss team in the country, or one of the best. Oregon, we all thought would be there, and the only question was that, they got blown out by Georgia. USC, I wasn't very high on them because their schedule was not good earlier in the season, and they did lose to Utah. But like then their schedule got really hard, and they won every single game, and so now they've earned it, right? And I was really high on UCLA, and UCLA is, they kind of fell apart a little bit at the end, but those 4 teams were great. And then Washington came out of nowhere and is probably going to make the Rose Bowl. So it's like, I mean, the Pac-12, I don't think it's the best conference this year. Maybe they don't have like that top team, but as far as the top, like the top half of the Pac-12 was amazing. Oregon State, Washington, Oregon, Utah, USC, UCLA, like all of those teams, if you put them up against a lot of those top 10 teams, you'd be like, yeah, they could win, right? Or maybe they'll lose.
I think you might be reaching a little bit there, partner. You might be reaching there a little bit, because I'm just off the top of my head. The SEC is to me still no doubt the best division, best conference in all college football. So when you want to talk about putting Washington or Oregon State or any of these teams against an SEC opponent, irregardless of the location, I need to see it first. Yes, the Pac-12 has had somewhat of a resurgence. I'll give you that. They have definitely played above their expectations, because for the last 5 years or so, the Pac-12 has been non-existent. We have not had a reason to talk about them. They have been absolute dog shit. So congrats to them for finally coming to the table and bringing a couple teams with some legitimacy in USC, UCLA, and Oregon for the majority of the year. But I'm still not going to say the Pac-12 as a whole is dominant or worthy of being in the conversation as the SEC. In saying that, no. USC deserves to be number 4.
Yeah, no, I agree too. And again, it was more of that. Like I know since last time we were on this podcast, I wasn't too high on USC, and I was telling everybody that UCLA was going to beat them, but they went in and they beat USC or UCLA, and they beat Notre Dame, and they finished their season really on a high note. And that's what you need to do against teams that, when your schedule isn't as difficult in the beginning, you need to go in there. They also got help from like Oregon State beat Oregon. And so there's a lot the USC did, and they deserve it. And again, they're not in unless they win this Friday. So tomorrow, today, whatever day you're seeing this podcast, they're not in unless they win. So they still have work to do. But avenging your loss against Utah, we go back to some of our first podcasts ever, where I said that Sam Darnold and USC Even though they started 0-2, they put Darnold in. They went 10-0. They avenged their loss against one of the teams they played earlier that season. You have to look at that as like one loss, right? You go in and you're now have neutral site. Your only game that your USC that you lost was a game in one of the toughest places to play in Utah in the fall, in the cold. And they went for 2 and got it, and that's why you lost. And you lost your number one receiver in the game. And there was a lot of penalties that went against you that a lot of people did not think were penalties at all. You go in and you beat Utah, and if you beat Utah handily, USC is proven that they could beat every single team that was on their schedule that year. And that's what you have to do, right? That's what Michigan's done. That's what Georgia's done. That is what TCU has done. Ohio State, Alabama, that's not true. Absolutely not true. And they're behind USC. So if USC goes in and they win, they're in. And so now, Jared, I think we go to this spot about the college football playoff rankings. Give me your scenarios if USC wins, how Ohio State or Alabama could get in?
They can't.
Okay. So even with TCU,
if I'm understanding you correctly,
sure.
Georgia, Michigan, and TCU are still 1, 2, 3. Like you're strictly talking about USC right now.
No. Here's what I'm saying. I'm saying USC has the first game. So let's say USC wins Friday, they're in.
Right.
You have 3 games on Saturday: Georgia versus LSU,
right?
Michigan versus Purdue,
right?
And TCU versus Kansas State.
Okay.
Give me the scenarios, if you think they're possible,
I got you.
of how Ohio State or Alabama could get in. Because I still do think
it's TCU,
all of those teams.
TCU's a weakling. Michigan is going up against a Purdue team that might be without their starting quarterback, and that's because, if I'm not mistaken, his brother passed away this past week. So, unfortunately, now the reports are that the team thinks he may still play, and if he does, like, God bless you, man. Like you are stronger than many people would be. But the potential scenario is that they could be without their starting quarterback. And I think in that sense, Michigan obviously should take care of Purdue relatively easily. Georgia and LSU. I mean, LSU surprising teams, right? LSU starting off was like, oh my gosh, Brian Kelly, who are you? What are you doing? And they've had a resurgence, but this is still Georgia we're talking about. So I expect Georgia to handle their business and say, number one, TCU to me is the weak link. TCU, if I'm Ohio State and Alabama, I am solely watching the TCU game on Saturday and praying. Now, to me, even though Ohio State got their ass whipped last week, Ohio State would to me be the only other team that could come in here. I don't think in the history of the college football playoff rankings, there's been a team that has gotten in 1, 2, 3, or 4 that has had 2 losses. I don't think.
No, that's true.
So if we are going by the history of the committee, Alabama is essentially already out because they have 2 losses. It's still Alabama. It's still Nick Saban. They could obviously compete with any of these 5 teams that are ahead of them. I have no doubt about that. But because they do have those 2 losses, I'm essentially going to call them out already. So to me, it would be Ohio State who is hoping and praying and wishing that TCU gets somewhat blown out. Like if TCU maybe loses by 1, they're probably still out. But like it would make things easier if TCU loses by double digits or more than a touchdown. That would be how Ohio State would get back in. And then to me, it would be really interesting because let's say that scenario plays out and TCU loses and you bump out Ohio State. Do you put USC at 3 and Ohio State 4? Or
and
I say this to ask this question because if for some random reason, let's say USC like has another close game against Utah and they win, but it's not a blowout or it's not convincing. Do you put Ohio State at 3 and then you have a college football championship of the rematch of Michigan and Ohio State? Like that would have to be tempting in the committee's eyes from a profit money standpoint of the rematch of the game. I don't think they should do that. I'm just saying that's something that would have to be considered. But in that scenario, I would go Georgia 1, Michigan 2, USC 3, Ohio State 4. Like I said, Ohio State and Alabama, in my opinion, are their best bet is TCU losing. But in my real opinion, Alabama doesn't have a chance because they have 2 losses.
Here's my thing. You know what? When you said, I like what you said. I mean, you make some good argument. There are some things that could happen to me this weekend that would change some things. So, I think Georgia, no matter what, is it. They beat enough team. Yeah, because even if you lose, like LSU is a good team. It's not like you're like. Yeah, I'll get to this in a second, but I think Georgia, no matter what, with 1 loss, has a better. I mean, they may even still be ranked ahead of USC at that point, like based on USC's schedule. So I think Georgia, at worst, is 4. They should just put in their backups this weekend and save all their guys, right? So Georgia's in no matter what. If they were to lose, they're not number 1 unless all the other teams lose, which would be insane. And we're not going to go on that. I don't think that every team's going to lose. It is kind of nice that top 4 teams they'll all do play because they could lose, and then we have this just argument about all this stuff. TCU has, out of the top 4 teams, actually out of the top 6, has the toughest schedule. They have the best strength of schedule. So how could you possibly eliminate that team? Because I'll tell you this, Jared, Kansas State is no joke. This is a really good football team. When you look at their losses this season, they kind of blew it against Tulane. Tulane is shown to be a pretty good team. This year, they've been in the top 25 rankings for most of the season. They lost to Texas in absolute back and forth, knock them out, drag them out brawl. Came down in the last few plays, and they lost to TCU. So Kansas State is a really good football team. They're a really good 9-3 team. So if Kansas State goes in there and beats TCU, again, like if USC wins, and then like why should Ohio State get in over TCU when TCU has a tougher strength of schedule? Their only loss would be to a top 10 team, whereas Ohio State's schedule was not difficult at all this season, and their loss to Michigan was a loss. They didn't get screwed. That score is way worse than that game was. I mean, that was a lot closer. And even when you look at Jared, this is what I was going to disagree with you about. The reason that Edwards had that many yards is because his last 2 runs of the game were like 150 yards combined.
Well, and
so like you can't act like they ran all over the fucking place.
No, and to piggyback off of that, the reason why he broke those off was because Ohio State literally didn't have their safeties. They put 9 guys in the box, 2 corners out wide, and said, we have to stop them behind the line of scrimmage or they're going to score. It was like an all-out blitz, right? So, yes, I get it. They broke the first line of scrimmage, the first line of defense, and then there was no safety to help. So, I get it. The game was closer than maybe the score predicted, which is why I want to see a rematch. And I wasn't even really thinking of this. If, in your eyes, if you think that Georgia, no matter what, is still in, even if they lose, I actually want to see Georgia lose then because I want to see a rematch of Michigan and Ohio State potentially. So in that scenario for me, I have Georgia losing but staying in the top 4. I have Michigan winning, so Michigan would go to number 1.
Sure.
I have, let's see here. You can really put, you can put TCU. Well, no, actually, in my scenario, I would have TCU losing. So
not USC?
TCU. No, not USC.
No, because I'm saying if USC loses and TCU wins, then Ohio State number 4. Pretty easy.
Right.
And
no,
then
I'm saying in my opinion, if TCU loses and actually loses, it's not close, then I have a real argument to put Ohio State in. I get what you're saying, strength of schedule, and I think realistically they would keep TCU. I'm just saying I want to see Michigan, Ohio State. So I'm trying to find.
I'll say this.
I'm mustering a way to get
I feel
Michigan to number 1.
I feel you.
And Ohio State to number 4, and then 2-3 would be Georgia, USC. That's like mustering a way to get a rematch of the game.
And that would be the only way it would happen, because the thing is that the committee has said that they don't like rematches if it's not the national championship, because they think essentially, it's the college football playoff. It's not meant to be this rivalry fest so it's whatever, right? But and the fact they can't play the Big Ten championship game, you could have that three-peat, right? Some of these years you technically could have, like in the SEC or in the Pac-12 or the Big Ten, you have rematches where, like, let's say Kansas State had one loss and TCU was undefeated. You have Kansas State and TCU swapping off twice and then playing again somehow at that point in that season. But I'll say this. I don't know how Alabama gets in. That's why I don't like why they're ranked so high.
They don't.
Again, guys, I understand that Tennessee lost Hendon Hooker. But for Tennessee to be below Alabama makes no sense. Tennessee should be number 6. And then that plateaus because we all know Tennessee lost to Georgia. They lost to South Carolina, who, by the way, South Carolina's ranked. They weren't that bad of a team. That loss isn't that bad. They lost Hendon Hooker to a torn ACL in that game. Tennessee is better than Alabama. So Alabama should not be up there. So I have eliminated Alabama. Here's what I think happens this Saturday. This is my prediction. Georgia takes care of business against LSU. They are the number 1 team, the number 1 seed. Michigan takes care of business against Purdue. They are the number 2 team. USC takes care of business against Utah on Friday, tonight or tomorrow, and they're the number 3 team. And then I think TCU gets upset by Kansas State, and Ohio State somehow gets in. And my top 4 after this weekend is Georgia, Michigan, USC, and Ohio State. You don't have the Michigan-Ohio State rematch that the college football playoff doesn't want. And you have Georgia versus Ohio State. Oh, my God, what a game that is. Again in Georgia. I mean, how many First of all, here's the other thing, too. So, Georgia this season, you talk about getting, like, handed some shit, right? I know that Ohio State and Michigan both had, like, 7, 8 home games this year. Georgia's neutral site games this season, if all goes well, neutral site in Atlanta against Oregon, neutral site in the SEC championship game in Georgia, okay, in Atlanta, and then the college football playoff first round matchup in Atlanta. Like, come on, what the hell is that? Like, what are we doing, right? So, again, it's all stacked in for Georgia, and if they end up winning the national championship, you can thank the NCAA for doing that for them. Gee, man, good scheduling by Kirby Smart and the crew. That's what I think will happen. I think TCU will run out of luck. I think Kansas State's a really, really good team. I know TCU has kind of ended the season well with that big win this last weekend. I like Max Duggan. I just think something's going to happen. Something's going to happen this weekend. There's no way Ohio State stays out. Ohio State's a talented team. They did not get killed by Michigan. Don't look at that score. They were within, again, they pack the box. Rusher gets out. Safety plays the play horribly, and they're not able to tackle Edwards. They go up by 2 touchdowns. And C.J. Stroud throws an ill-advised, toss ball to a tight end. It gets intercepted, and then again run the box. Like, Ohio State was a couple plays away from them still being in that game, potentially even being able to tie it. So Ohio State's right there. And again, if you look at like how high ranked Michigan was the whole season, how they blew out everybody, why is that being punished against Ohio State? Like, they played the same schedule essentially. They both killed Penn State. Then they both have Penn State ranked in the top 10, which they should be. Penn State's done their work too. So again, I don't necessarily think Ohio State should be punished for losing one game. TCU, it's the same thing, but you would lose to an inferior opponent. It's interesting. Tough. It's a tough one, and it will be debated next week when the college football playoff rankings come out, and I can't wait. But that's what I see happening. I'll say this: if we want all pandemonium to happen, okay, let's have Georgia win, right? Let's have Michigan lose to Purdue. like, like if that happens, what do you do then? Like, legit, what do you do then? If Georgia wins, TCU wins, USC wins, and they'll handle their business, who's the fourth team? I guess you have to put Michigan in, but like Michigan losing to Purdue, I think you almost have to put Ohio State in at that point. Like,
no, you have to.
If they're able to put Alabama above, or maybe you stick Alabama.
I would no. If Michigan somehow loses, and
and all the other teams blow out, like all the other teams blow out their opponents.
No, no. Listen, if Michigan loses, period, I don't care if it's a blowout. I don't care if they lose by 1 point. Michigan is out. Purdue is unranked.
They're out, yeah. But Purdue, so who's in?
Ohio State.
I love it, right? That's why these rankings are like, come on, guys. Like
Purdue is 8-4. They are unranked. If somehow, and like I said, I hope their quarterback can muster up the courage and energy to play after the devastating loss to his family. If he somehow plays and they somehow rally around him and something crazy happens and Michigan loses, yes, Michigan is out. You cannot lose in the conference championship game to an unranked 8-4 team that does not deserve and is not in the top 25 for a reason. It does no. Michigan is out. I don't care. We can have a debate about Ohio State and whoever else. They're out.
Here's the interesting thing too, and when you look at limited get the rankings really quickly up before I say this.
Yeah, and just to piggyback to you, I agree with you. I think it's Georgia, Michigan. I think TCU slips up. I think USC moves up to number 3, and I think the committee puts Ohio State back in just because it is Ohio State. And listen, TCU, they have a great run, but we've had certain doubts about TCU every week, even though they're undefeated. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we haven't had as many doubts about Georgia or Michigan. Every single week, TCU has still been questioned to a degree. So
yeah,
they have essentially they have to blow
I think we almost guilt tripped. I think we remember how low TCU was ranked in the first college football rankings. I think we almost guilt tripped the committee into forcing them up there. And that's why I think the committee is hoping to God. They're like, well, we hope TCU loses, so it looks like we were right in the beginning. I'll say this, though. And this is the shame about all this stuff, right? Georgia wins, USC wins, TCU, they all take care of their business. Michigan loses. At that point, the rightful team that should make it is Tennessee. But because Tennessee lost Hendon Hooker, we don't get that. And so because Tennessee beat Alabama, so there's no way you put them in ahead, right? Because South Carolina's ranked so high and Tennessee's losses would only be on the road to South Carolina and Georgia, the number 1 team and the top 20 team. Alabama has, like, I know they lost to, it was Tennessee and who else? LSU, right? Which are worse losses. That's worse losses than Tennessee has. And then they should have lost Texas A&M. They should have lost to Texas. Like, realistically, it should be Tennessee, and it's not Hendon Hooker, unfortunately. But I think, I really wish Hendon Hooker was there because I do think that Tennessee would be up there at 6. And if Michigan were to lose, you at that point would have to put Tennessee in. So we're missing out on that, and we have less of a story to tell this weekend. But yeah, no, I think if USC, I think Ohio State will find a way to get in because they're not a bad football team. They've been hampered with injuries. They've missed Jackson Smith and Jigba the entire season. They're missing all their running backs. They have their 3rd string running back in there at this point. And so, that I think Ohio State's still a good team, and you get certain guys back potentially. You give them a month to prepare. You never know. Ohio State could beat Georgia. You never know. Ohio State could beat the USC. They could beat Michigan. And we're lining up Ohio State versus USC. The favorite's got to be Ohio State at that point. I think the favorite in the Michigan-Ohio State game would still be Michigan because of what they did. But again, Ohio State, potentially you'd favor them ahead of a team that's ahead of them in the rankings. TCU too. I think Ohio State's ranked so it's gonna be interesting. But I think
Well, let's move into the last topic before we get off the show.
Yep.
In just a couple years, 2 years to be exact, the College Football Committee has expanded the college football playoff. And so next year, 2023, will be the last year of the 14 playoff. And in 2 years, Nick, we will be having a lot more to discuss because we will then have 12 teams in the playoff. And you want to talk about chaos. It is going to be absolutely bananas because right now, right, let's play the hypothetical game. The top 12 teams that would be in the playoffs would be Georgia, Michigan, TCU, USC, Ohio State, Alabama, Tennessee, Penn State, Clemson, Kansas State, Utah, and Washington. We would have an unprecedented 3.
Well, no,
Pac-12
Jared,
teams.
it would be what do you call it? It would be Tulane or UCF. That's who would make it into the final spot.
Oh, you're right, because there's one non-Power 5.
And also, like,
okay.
you would
So
probably it would be different because you're going to have probably Washington instead of Utah if Utah loses. So it's probably, but no, I don't want to be specific. Obviously, we're making a joke, but it would most likely be.
There's going to be a lot more shit. There's going to be a lot more teams. It's going to be a lot crazier. It's exactly what we want. Whether you're a fan, whether you bet, whether you just want to see some craziness, there's going to be a lot. Now the question is, and I don't know this for sure, maybe you do, are the top 2 teams going to get buys? Like, are we just going to have? Are we going to?
No. So it's okay. So here it is. It's the top 4 conference champions. So what you see in the top 4 right now, if they all win their conference championships, those would be the buys. So after this week, if we had a 12-team playoff and Georgia, Michigan, TCU, and USC win, those are the top 4 conference champions. We're leaving out what conference are we leaving out? The ACC. So Clemson would not obviously be in at that point. So we would have those teams would have a bye, and then we would have we would have Ohio State versus Tulane or UCF or Notre Dame at that point. You would have Alabama versus Utah. You would have Tennessee versus Kansas State, and you'd have Penn State versus Clemson. So those would be the first round matchups, and then they would all seed kind of like the World Cup, or like you see a lot of the NBA playoffs and stuff like that, where the seeding would end up, you'd have the 4 or 5 matchup, all that stuff. So similar to what the NFL playoffs used to kind of be, in a way. 2 buys for each conference, but it would all be connected together. So yeah, it would be. I mean, it would be hella fun because, like I said, I think like Utah's a great team, Kansas State's a great team, Penn State's a great team, Tennessee, if they had ended, like, it would be very interesting to see who would make it, right? And you would have like USC and Ohio State in the quarterfinals. So you'd be like, oh shit, here we go, and then you'd have Alabama, TCU if Alabama were to advance. Very interesting.
TCU.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you would reward like Michigan and Georgia for being 1 and 2. They would have like Tennessee or Penn State, and it would be an easier matchup if they were able to win, or a lesser matchup. So, yeah, no, Jared, I'm super excited. The Rose Bowl comes through. They make the agreement. Yeah, 2024, that's what we're looking at. So 1 more year next year of this shitty college football playoff, and then absolute pandemonium in 2024. 12 teams making it. So many more games mattering at the end of the season, and not like this eliminating teams. Like, again, we've eliminated Kansas State and Clemson and Penn State and Tennessee and Alabama and Florida State and LSU for having 3 losses. Like, if you have 3 losses, you still might win the national championship, right? We've seen NFL teams do it, right? Where they have 5, 6 losses and they go on and win the Super Bowl. So it's going to be really fun, Jared. I'm very, very excited about it. And in a year like this, where we've had multiple 1-2 games, 2-3 games, like 1 versus 4, 1 versus 3, like those games matter so much. And then even 15 versus 11 matters, and like 20 versus 10 matters. And if like South Carolina upsetting Tennessee at the end of the season like that, you're like, oh my God, they might make the playoff now. Right. And then you have all these teams like Tulane could win the national championship technically. Right. So here's the one funny thing, too. is that like Notre Dame could never get a bye unless they join the ACC.
Good.
So that it would, yeah,
Good.
exactly. And
Fuck 'em.
UConn and New Mexico State could never get a bye because they could never win a conference.
Good. So hopefully this eliminates the independents then. Because
Yeah,
Notre Dame being an independent and only football, like they are ACC schools for basketball and, if I'm not mistaken, every other sport that they have at that university except for football. So
Yeah.
Screw Notre Dame. I'm happy for their coach. I'm glad that he's kind of turned it around a little bit, but there should not be a independent, or at least especially Notre Dame. They're too big of a program. They need to be just in the ACC as a whole, or go find another conference. So good. I hope for because I'm not really a Notre Dame fan, I hope that they stay independent, and I hope that they never get a bye.
By the way, it would be interesting too because you would have, and obviously the conferences are going to be insane because by that time I believe it would be USC and UCLA in the Big Ten. So you would have the Pac-12 would be kind of a joke at that point. I think that's why they said like, hey, top 4, but like maybe you do top 2, right? Like I don't know. You do top 4 and then the highest seeds after that get byes because I think at that point you're only really looking at the SEC, Big 10, and Big 12 as legitimate conferences to be. But I don't know. You never know. Texas, Oklahoma are leaving the Big 10 on the SEC, so it's really SEC and Big 10. But yeah, very interesting stuff. Jay, I'm excited though. I really have followed college football so much this season. It's been really fun, and to have now knowing in 2 years and expanding. Also, Chase's graduate transfer year. You never know. Like,
let's go, Chase.
Joins the Bruins or the Trojans or one of these other teams after Yale, and I get to maybe see him play in the college football playoff, like 12-team playoff. Like, come on, you can't ask for more than that. Oh, Jared, what a show!
I got more breaking news as we wrap this up. Von Miller of the Buffalo Bills going on IR, so he'll be out for at least the next 4 games. He said on this podcast that he was going to try to play through his injury, but I think the Bills are saying we're going to get to the playoffs. We need you for the stretch run. So interesting there. Von Miller on IR, and then just to wrap up the show, it's a great day for the Dallas Cowboys to sign Odell Beckham Jr. Just saying.
Yeah, it is, and I bet, like I said, Von Miller said he was going to lock Odell in their house, and maybe there'll be a couple snowfalls, so literally the door won't even be able to open. Won't be able to open.
That's fine. Jerry Jones will come in with his helicopter and plow the shit out of that snow, and probably burn down Von Miller's house or something to get him out. So yeah, I'm fine. It's fine. No big deal.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Jerry, what a show! What a show, right? So much to talk about. Glad to be back. We will be back next week talking about hopefully Odell Beckham Jr. signing with a team. We will be back next week talking about who the hell is going to the college football playoff. We will be back next week talking about hopefully not Deshaun Watson, but maybe, right? And it's going to be a big show next week. Tons of NFL, tons of college football. Boy, Jared, we're back. Again, congrats to the Yale Bulldogs. 2022 Ivy League champs. No co-champs. They the champs. I went to the game. I'm excited next week in New Haven or wherever they want to play that game, in Gillette Stadium or wherever they want to play that game. I'll be there next year. In spirit, I've been to 3 football games in the last 3 weeks. I was unable to make it to a game this weekend, but in spirit, my roommate is at USC and Utah this Friday. So in spirit, I'll be there. Big games, guys. Big games all around. Bills, Patriots tonight. USC, Utah tonight if you're looking on Friday. If you're listening on Friday. Saturday, USA, Netherlands at 7. Then TCU, Kansas State at 9. Then we have, I believe it's the SEC championship at night or at 1 o'clock. It's a pandemonium everywhere, Jared, for these games. And I cannot wait. But for this podcast, we are done. I am Nenad.
I am Jared Smith.
We'll see you next week with a giant show.